quickly, I don't know if the commissioners were aware, we had our Maryland Association of Boards of Education conference this past weekend. Tom and I were asked to mirror the presentations that were done at NACO about local boards of education and local government fiscal relationship best practice. Howard County did a white paper as a result of that. So we did a presentation to the Board of Education side about that, and just about the nature of our relationship and the open communication and collaboration that we have, and then some of the cost savings collaboration that we've done with the county. And there was a policy analyst from MACO in the audience, and she came up to me afterward and is interested in having our presentation on the MACO website. So we're going to take a look at it and just kind of see if we need to tweak it more for the broader audience, and maybe include a little bit more information on the commissioners.
We'll send you a copy.
I need to follow up too, because at that same one where Howard County presented the paper, I was also one of the speakers.
Yes,
in the
you were.
And interestingly enough, I talked about communication and collaboration also. But one of the things that I challenged the audience with, because there were a lot of educators in the audience, but also a lot of elected officials, was that we can't let the state decide what MOE looks like for us, and they're tired of the fight between the counties and education. And so my suggestion and my challenge was that we sit down and we work this out. I would love if Cecil County could be a model for that. I'd really like to pursue that, because we're not getting anywhere, and the state legislators they're tired of it.
Yeah.
So.
And at least my portion of the focus for that audience, for boards, what I really focused on is boards taking a look at the relationships among themselves first, and how critical it is for boards to be a cohesive team in the development of their own budget process, and then working together, to work collaboratively with the county. So it was kind of an interesting thing about, you can't really look to forge good relationships externally if you haven't worked on those internally first. But we talked about how it's a year-round process, not just budget process, but that we try to have you come to our events and vice versa and things like that, and really keep those open lines of communication. And that as a board, we try to stay aware of the other issues that you all have to deal with and are facing, and be sensitive to that, and keep ourselves educated on that, so that we know that although we can be kind of singularly focused sometimes, that you don't have a lot of things you juggle with.
We can't.
Right.
That was my point as well.
Right. So yeah, we'll be happy to share that with you. But we were honored to be asked. We were supposed to be joined by Prince George's County, but just mere days before they let go of their chief financial officer for the school systems. They weren't really in a position to present on that. So what they did is they substituted the John Willems from MABE got permission from Howard County to present their white paper. So
and it was excellent. He did that. I remember it very good.
Yeah.
Mrs. Anderson came to the Eastern Shore Superintendent's meeting, one of our last one, to try to talk to superintendents, had to have a little bit about just that kind of thing, collaboration between each board. It's good.
I sent each commissioner a text to see where they're at. I've not heard from Commissioner Brumell. Commissioner Dunn did not think he was going to be back for 1 o'clock. So if you want to start, that's fine. I haven't heard back from you.
I'd hope to present to your entire board, so you might guess. In the interest of time.
Sure, I don't want to hold you up. That's all.
Yeah, we were
Well,
asked
Jim,
to
I mean, the question, if they do want to present to the entire board, if the entire board isn't going to be here, do you want to reschedule?
I'll call Commissioner Brumell and see where she's at.
I mean, if it's not the entire board, it's
also disrespect.
While we're waiting from that conference, where Ken Allman made his presentation, there was 2 things I took away from that segment. Number one is there is a lot more collaboration that we can do together. There's a lot more things that we could probably work on together. They obviously have taken it very seriously and worked at it very hard. And I hope that we can do that too. The other thing was that I found out was that in Maryland, there are some county commissioners and school boards that are really, really at odds. months. I mean,
Yes.
you think we have problems? I can guarantee you that there's a hell of a lot worse
Exactly.
happening in
Absolutely.
Maryland, where there's total lack of trust, total everything. It's just totally, they are really in bad way.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree with that more, and we pick up on that, and I have to say, I know there are times when, we are at odds, and sometimes we need to be at odds, but please always know that we experience a fairly good relationship
No,
here.
overall, I think we do okay.
Yes.
There's things that we could do better.
Right, right.
But there are some counties out there that it's a war.
Absolutely,
It is a war.
with no winners on either side, so.
Good. First, we want to share some good news with you. I know that you are aware, probably are aware, that in the last 2 weeks, Cecil County Public Schools were named Large Business of the Year at the Chamber's function. And that on Friday evening, our Teacher of the Year, County Teacher of the Year, Rhonda Holmes Blankenship, was named Maryland State Teacher of the Year. Rhonda is a Northeast High School graduate. She is the first college graduate in her family. She credits the school system, and specifically her teachers and her cheerleading coach, with pointing her in the right direction for a college education. And what we realized that evening, the many different, what I like to call Cecil County connections. Her mother and I were in high school together, unbeknownst to either one of us until we got down there the other night. So it was a wonderful night. She spoke very eloquently, and she will represent Maryland exceptionally well going forward. We have had one previous state winner in 1999, and we've had 4 finalists, but this is our second winner of the state prize. So we hope that you join us in being very, very proud of that fact. She represents the quality teachers here in the county, of which we are very proud. And we're going to be holding a reception for her at some point this fall, and we'll be sure to give every one of you an invitation so that you can meet her firsthand. She's a really special person. The second purpose for us to be here today is to ask you to reconsider your entering into negotiations on the DeSalle property, so that we could conduct an engineering study of the property to convert it into, in the first term, an expanded school of tech. And I know that there are varying opinions about how to move forward with that, or if to move forward. I just want to, again, make a couple of clarifications and then present to you a revised budget, and then provide some letters of endorsement. The first thing I really want to make clear is that the Elkton High School renovation and the DeSalle renovation are very, very dissimilar. I was the principal at Elkton High when we began to renovate the 1958 site. It was a complete gut job. What was left were the walls. Everything was done over. It was done over a period of 10 years because there were funding delays along the way. Not only was it completely renovated, there was a very significant addition put onto it. So the DeSalle property, in its smaller scope, with classrooms being erected, some walls, some paint, some carpet, they're really not, they're very dissimilar. And I would ask you to trust our track record, specifically Calvert, Perryville Middle School, Charlestown, and many projects prior to that have come in under budget. And so that our expertise to play there. So just want to make that clear. The most significant renovation would be adding a welding lab and cosmetology labs. That would be where the costs are. And the whole building will be renovated. Comprehensive high school versus a center technical school. Right now, we do not have enough enrollment, as you're aware, to justify a 6th high school. We do have children in our high schools, many of whom are underserved by the current technical program and the way we deliver it. I could get 200 kids a year through a technical training in our current site. I can get 580 through in the improved site. The notion that we don't disagree about the comprehensive high school. We know it's costly, and we know we don't have enrollment, but in the long term we will, and this property could be converted from a short-term school of technology to a comprehensive high school down the road when the numbers justify it. Third, We have done what some of you have asked in terms of expanding career and technical education programs in our high schools. Perryville High, for example, has the biomedical program Project Lead the Way. 150 students are availing themselves of that. But we have never been able to afford to replicate it in 4 other places. The equipment is too expensive. That's the kind of program that should go to a center school in the short term. Equally, we've tried to run the smaller programs. Oracle and Cisco did hardware and software training for our kids in all 5 high schools. Those are specific fields that you will have some children in all high schools that want to take advantage of, but not enough in any one high school. So that's on the other end of the spectrum, if you will, in a smaller number, a program that would be really well served by a central place. And we have a career and technical program for a lot of our high schoolers in place now, with over 2,500 different kids taking advantage of courses throughout the year. So there's plenty of opportunities for them to take those courses. But what we're talking about here are programs that are too expensive with facilities and equipment to replicate all around, or programs that are too small. Transportation costs also have to be considered. We would just ask you to trust us in determining the best instructional delivery program, because quite frankly, that's what we're trained to do and charged to do. We just have to do that. Any increase in operating expenses, because there will be some, will be our responsibility. We're not going to ask the commissioners. We give us a budget. We have to reallocate our funding according to our priorities. Case in point, Calvert Elementary, in addition to that school, we absorbed all of that. We did not have new staff. We reallocated and repositioned our staff and resources. And we understand that you realize a decrease in tax benefits, but ask you to consider that strong schools and a well-prepared workforce will bring employers who bring jobs, and then the cycle, a strong economy will help everyone. So we would ask you to consider that. So those are sort of the big sticking points that we could see from what our discussions with you and reading each other's positions. And so we wanted to make those clarifications, not belabor them, but just again tell it from our view. And then we, as I mentioned, we have a revised budget because again we've been asked for us to give greater support. And what I have done, there's 4. The budget's at the top, and then Mr. Weiner copied that, and Mr. Dunn. The budget's on the top, and I'll have Mr. Capra explain that, and then I will explain what's the rest of the packet.
Thank you, Dr. Dunn. The totals in for the project costs have not changed since the original projections we made back in January, February. The purchase was a list price, current list price for the property is $6.5 million. So we're using that in this analysis. And then you see a breakdown of the renovation costs. Total renovation costs of $9.9 million. Per Dr. Lever, when he came down and made his visit, the numbers for the state participation, as you recall, have increased since the original proposal, and this is based on his input, his direct input, looking at what we propose as a budget. The state participates on the bricks and sticks, the construction component of projects, and currently the rate is 69%. So the state puts up 69%, the other 31% is borne by the local. That's the current ratio. And you see site contingencies and planning in there. So the breakdown is $4.6 million from the state, $3.8 million for the county, and we included $1.5 million that we would put from our fund balance towards the project. And you know that's a departure from the way capital improvement projects are normally funded. Normally, we don't contribute anything from our operating budget towards these projects. We feel strongly about this project and are willing to commit $1.5 million, primarily for equipment, the equipment that would be installed in the building. We're not gonna contribute to the construction or planning, but put the equipment in the building, we think we can provide that through our operating budget. So the total for the project, $16.4 million. In addition to that, and some of these things we talked about before, we need, once we can, if we can proceed and come to agreement on a fixed price contract with the seller, we need to evaluate the building. We estimate that'll cost $60,000 to get an outside engineering firm to assist us along with our own staff. We would pay for that out of our current operating budget. After the purchase, we would have to maintain the building, so we would have to have somebody there to maintain the systems while it's unoccupied, and then of course while it's being renovated and unoccupied. We estimate that to be $210,000 for the first year. And our plan is then to renovate the old school of technology, convert it to warehouse space and office space at a cost of $60,000, and then to relocate the operations at the building we're currently leasing at 801 Elkton Boulevard, and that's transportation, food, nutrition, and warehouse, and move all those operations to the old school of technology. In addition, we have maintenance operations outside of our central office on Booth Street. We also want to move that facility, everyone in that facility, to the old school technology. So we'll have all of our service departments at the one location at the School of Technology. That'll free up that building. So we can, I don't know if there's potential to do something with that, sell it or whatever, but that property would be vacant. So we're looking at a total contribution from our current operating budget of $390,000. The bottom is a summary of what would happen with our debt service over the next 5 years. If the county was to fund the entire project using bond revenue. And we included our CIP as it was approved last year in the projection also, because that's part of the county's debt. So over this period of time, we're looking at investment from the county of $24 million. And the bottom, what happens to our debt service over that period of time. Currently, we have outstanding bonds of $70 million. At the end of fiscal 2017, with our CIP and this project, our outstanding bond principal would actually be reduced by $3.7 million. And that's an indication of the fact that we have not been getting the investment in our facilities as we had in the past. If you go back to fiscal 2006, we had outstanding bond principal of $100 million. So since then, our outstanding bonds, our debt has been reduced significantly because we haven't been getting the investment in our facilities. As a result of that, we've also accumulated about $51 million in deferred maintenance. Typically, those types of large maintenance projects are taken care of when we renovate a building, because we haven't been doing that. Prior to 2006, we were doing 2 schools, an average of 2 schools a year. Since we haven't been doing that, our deferred maintenance list is growing significantly. So you see, we'll have dropped over $30 million in outstanding bond principal since 2006. The debt service payment is, of course, what the county pays from your annual operating budget for principal and interest payments, and that would also be down by $556,000. So our position is that the county can choose to fund this through bonds if they so choose, and would not increase our total debt over the period of time that this project is being implemented.
Also attached to the budget are letters of support. I draw your attention to that from the Chamber of Commerce, from the Cecil County Firemen's Association, from Cecil College, from Cecil Business Leaders, and from our own BPAC organization. I also understand through Mr. Ratchford that he sent a letter from the Economic Development Commission last week. They also endorsed supporting going into negotiations with the sellers in order to determine if the property is suitable and viable for a high school, technical school. And so we would ask you to review those. There's much support for this in the community. It's something that the school system is saying we very much need to expand our technical training, to take advantage of what the opportunities are here in this corridor, and we would entertain any questions you have.
I just have one. In your dissertation, begin starting out with the School of Tech and then to kind of move over to a comprehensive school. How long would that round idea transition of that to go from a School of Tech to a comprehensive school? Because that's kind of what I've heard on land. Well, it would be better to have a comprehensive school, so everybody agrees with that, but what's the transition piece?
I don't think we could have a transition or a comprehensive school for a decade.
I think
And
it depends on enrollment.
Right, it's based on enrollment.
So-
Ground Department planning is predicting that we'll grow about 1.5% per year for the next 10 years. So that would put us about that 800.
So about 10 years.
10 years, giving kids the same program that they're having.
But, and you've heard, I mean, I'm sure you guys have heard the various things about, all of the original stuff was based on that SAGE report about BRAC, and then BRAC happened at the same time the economy and the housing market tanked, so then I've been hearing some things about that we might get a second wave to BRAC once the housing market, so it could happen, you know, we could realize what they predicted in a second wave, so it's kind of that, you never really know, when they come, they come.
And it's important to remember too, the original project cost for the comprehensive school was $61 million. So we're looking at 16 and a half for this portion. To convert that building to a comprehensive school, it's going to be a lot less. You know, even in 10 years, we don't know what costs are going to be. But if we were to do it today, it would be significantly less than the $61 million. We wouldn't have to spend another $40 million to convert that building. We would only need to add classrooms, auditorium, gymnasium, fields, that kind of thing.
Plenty of space to do.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the understanding too is that restarts the participation from the state when you've got a situation like that.
Right.
When we have an increase in enrollment, and so we need to take that school to the next level, the state would reinvest in its participation. So it wouldn't preclude the state from, since we did this, but we didn't take it all the way, it would restart that process. So we would be okay with that.
Did you guys know what the cost of the Worcester County Tech High School was?
Worcester.
34 million.
Dorchester. It's 34 million.
Just sort of Worcester too, right?
don't know.
Ocean City, that county.
I'm not sure the Dorchester one. The one in Dorchester, they just cut the ribbon. on that
Dorchester was the
spring.
most recent. I'm not aware of
Yeah,
this one.
Worcester was
34
It's a tech school. They built it on the same site as their existing high school. They built it next door to it.
Craig, you have a question?
Okay, we would just really urge you to reconsider because we believe it's the most affordable option and will help the most children going forward. And if you have any questions or follow-up, I'd be happy to sit down with you individually and talk through it again. Just wanted to clarify our position today and what we believe the facts surrounding the matter really are. And hope that we can move forward with an affordable solution in the short term for technical training and morphing into a more comprehensive one later on. So bring that for your consideration.
If I could come back full circle to something that we started out with talking about, the Commissioner Haas brought up the recent panel at Mako and Howard County talking about the increased look at collaboration among Board of Education and the county. And we had brought this up before, this has come up when we're out in the community. I think that this is an opportune time for us to employ that approach to this. This is not just solely a need from the school system's standpoint. We talked about the property itself being available for us to really kind of take a look at things in a way we haven't in the past. So is there dual use for some of this stuff across the county agencies? But also, as was pointed out, we are vacating a building, you know, and we have that. And so there's this talk about, you know, we can take a look at what this project, how this would impact across the board, and we can kind of work together to see if there's any benefit on the county side of us relocating and moving things, and whether or not there's benefit to you all to take some of that on for something that you're looking for. So I guess I would put the plea, I put it out in the beginning, but I would put the plea out of if we really could take this opportunity to approach this differently than we really ever have, and sit down and work through this together and really talk about this as an entire county. I think our constituents don't necessarily see education, government separate, you know, they see it as an entire county system, and I think it would be in good service to our constituents if we really tried to put our heads together and figure this out collaboratively.
How long do you anticipate the engineering study would take?
60 days.
60?
And we have departed from past history and practice by putting money from our fund balance into this endeavor. And that shows our good faith. We're trying to look at things somewhat differently than we have in the past.
How many square feet is the current tech school?
74,000.
Do you have the STEP program incorporated into that building?
We have it at our current School of Tech, and we would have an expanded version into the new building, yes.
Is there a possibility you could relocate the STEP program to expand the current location to increase your enrollment?
Relocate the STEP program to where?
A facility that has added surplus room. Does Perryville have additional room? Elton?
They don't have the kind of lab spaces we need for the STEP program, because the STEP program is an employability skills, and they do embroidery. It's hands-on, it's equipment intensive, it needs a large lab space.
They're only freeing up 1,400 square feet in the school for technology, current school technology. They have one classroom. And they've got other things, all of those pieces of equipment in there. So doubling the size of it by moving to the cell gives you the opportunity to take on more of this.
Eliminating it from the current school would not provide as much space. And this is a program we desperately need for our special needs youngsters.
Oh, no, I understand it's a very good program.
It is. And if you haven't seen it, I'd be happy to.
I've heard good things about it, and I'm not doubting.
Well,
It's a good program.
And if we, maybe to that point about, because I know that if you look at our high schools across the board, we have some under enrollment in some of the schools, but as I know you are well aware, we are over capacity in some of our others. That is something that continually
3 out of 5 were at or over.
Continually the board takes a look at, but as I'm sure you could guess, redistricting is not something we take lightly. So we've been studying that for a while. However, being under enrollment doesn't mean we've got big sections of our schools that sit empty. It may mean that some of your classes have a few less students in the desks, but to be able to say that because we're a little bit under capacity with students, that we can carve out a whole area to take over for an existing program. I wish it was that simple that it would work out that way. I wish the students would be under enrollment in a nice little neat package, but it doesn't always work out that easily.
I was asking if there had been another building done like this, a commercial property that was purchased for school, and what I heard was there was a building, I believe in Delaware, the Astro building, that they purchased, I think, for a middle school, and money was invested, and for some reason it didn't work. They had to resell it at a loss. Craig, do you know anything about that?
Perry,
I believe you're referring to the Christina School District. Abstract Power off of 896. I've done some work to see what exactly transpired, and the 30-cent version is likely that there's going to be an additional middle school back in the early 2000s is how it was envisioned. It was acquired by the school district, started to incur some expenses towards the project, and I believe within 2 to 3 years after that, it was determined that enrollment had begun to decline, and the school district looked largely at other options, and I believe the concept of an additional middle school there was abandoned in lieu of expanding an additional school that already existed. And there were some allegations of state impropriety about the usage of the bonds, or whether or not they had gotten requisite authority to do so. I believe the Attorney General of the state of Delaware was involved. Essentially what it amounted to was funding that project from otherwise where authority had been granted. So that created much upheaval back around 08, 09, and I guess the sum upshot of that was within the last year or so, I believe they had public hearings to place that property, I guess declare it as excess property. I do not know of its disposition at this point, so I believe it was granted of the authority to, I guess, sell it on the open market, but because they're having as much attraction to that facility as many others that we see. I guess that's maybe a 31-cent version.
The project manager for Christine at the time now works for us, as a matter of fact, and the project budget dried up as a result of the bond funds going into the operating budget at that time. That's when the state stepped in to audit the project, and it halted all construction. And it sits there that way now. No other additional rooms were built, no other additional spaces were constructed, and the project died.
How much did they invest?
I'm not sure what the total was, but Craig's correct. There were bond funds associated with coming from the state of Delaware into that project, and
I think they bought it for 30 million? 30?
I think
And they didn't do much to it.
Yeah, I think the
used.
funds were around 17 million when that they actually expended, I believe, if I recall correctly, when it was all said
They
and
use bond
done.
money in their operating budget.
Mhm. Well, then they turn
That
around
was
and
the
ask
allegation.
well, then they turn around and ask for additional authority to cover their gap, and that's when people started to ask questions as to exactly how did this happen.
So this is, our process here has been very above board. We would enter into
Yeah.
negotiations.
No, what I wanted
and we
was an
would do a
example
study.
of transitioning a piece of commercial
Making sure
property
that it wasn't
But I
the
don't-
to the
property
school. No, I'm
itself
just
that,
wondering,
yeah.
what would we encounter? What are some things we might encounter?
Now, there was a property out in Washington County that was turned into a school for the arts. And it was a public building that was redone, and now the Washington County school system uses it as the School of the Arts. It's right in downtown Hagerstown. So there are some models around the state of America, successful
I've been there.
models.
The
Yeah.
Susan B.
But
Ingram
maybe
School for the
treat-
Arts, it's right downtown, and
That's really
it's like a
a neat
storefront.
place.
So about, it's about
That's the
10
one
square feet.
but I think there are others across the state. That's the one comes to mind.
One of the things we would do during due diligence is get state approval for this building to be converted to a school. So that has to be done before, the deal is
It has to go through the state
finalized.
clearinghouse process.
What is the time frame that you anticipate do the engineering study? Let's assume that we move forward. And an engineering study is done, it's found to be acceptable, and we move forward with the additions of the welding lab and the cosmetology lab, and then the renovation or the remodeling of the school, plus all the approval that we have to get through the state. What's the estimated timeline of all that?
The best case scenario we don't do any of that until July 1 of next year,
Starting it?
because that's as soon as we can get state funding. It's in the current CIP request that was approved by our board in September. So all of those things, none of that renovation can take place until July 1, because that's when the state money would flow. We don't anticipate the first year of students actually being there till the following fall, which would put it in 2014, I guess. So it would take us at least that many months to get. There are 4 labor-intensive labs when you're talking about automotive and the lifts that you have to put in, culinary arts in the kitchen, cosmetology and all the sinks and basins and that kind of thing, and then the welding lab, which is intense as well. The rest of the labs are relatively carving up the spaces into rooms and then giving classroom appeal. But as you know, the ceilings are all there, the lighting is all there. There's 180 some zones in the building. We just need to go over and get used to the building. One of the things we did learn through questioning the realtor is that the central utility plant behind the building was sized for 2 buildings the size of the cell. So there are 2 boilers, there's 2 chillers, and that building, even though it accommodates the current building of 140 some thousand square feet, was sized for them to grow and double in size there at the 91-acre site. So we anticipate when we go into the central utility plant seeing some well-maintained, oversized equipment that we could probably take over and use for a long period of time.
Didn't the state say we had to replace the HVAC?
No, he didn't say that. What he basically said was he wanted to get also this engineering report that we would be contracting, and he wants to get those numbers too. The state's very good at protecting their own investments. So they also come out and they would also be interested in that feasibility study and that engineering report. So they're good at verifying before they spend, and they're great at verifying after they spend. And as you know, they come out once a year and do our inspections. As a matter of fact, they're at 5 of our schools this week, going through and looking at our buildings to see how well we maintain.
I think what the state said is if the life expectancy of some of the infrastructure of that building is very short term, then they would be better off replacing it now.
Right.
With the money in, instead of, nickel and dime, a little bit now, a little bit later, let's make it right now.
And that could very well be fine.
Right, so we don't know that until we actually do the due diligence. We don't know what the life cycle remaining is still on that property.
But even if we had to replace both of those, it's still a heck of a deal.
Yes, I totally agree, and I have to say that I have supported this project. I think it's a great project. If I had my preference, I would like every student in Cecil County to go to college. But it's obvious to me that it's not the case, that there isn't the desire for every student to go to college. And therefore, I think in the alternative, this is the best option, to give them a skill or a trade when they get out of school that they can put it to use. And there's plenty of examples of small business owners and others that have really contributed to Cecil County by going to or graduating from tech school in the past. And when I see what is possible, I see that the earning potential of these students far exceeds the loss of tax revenue from this property. So the short term is that we're going to lose a little bit of tax revenue. But the long term is that this is going to be a great benefit, both from a fiscal point of view and a social point of view, because I also believe that increasing capacity of the school will also reduce some dropout.
Absolutely, and we must address that.
It's going to reduce some dropout. It's going to encourage kids to stay in school, develop that skill or trade, be a more productive member of society, and we all will benefit from that. And I just wish that, and I'm going to ask, I have to say one more thing. This is a question for Dinah Brown. You have put a feather in your cap when you have always said that I work really hard to have an elected school board. Well, I guess my question is, what is their job?
I would like to see the elected school board take more initiative on their own.
Well, they've come to you with an initiative.
Yes.
They have been elected by the citizens of Cecil County. They're taking an initiative.
I don't think they're restricted to this one way in addressing their overpopulation or their waiting list. I still believe that there are other alternatives how are
Please
we to
tell me
go?
what they are.
And if I may, with all due respect, ask me directly about the conversations, the exhaustive conversations my Board of Education and I have had in considering multiple scenarios and ideas for this. I mean, this is, as you said, and I as the current beneficiary of your work, I applaud you for your efforts that you did to get an elected school board. I obviously believe in an elected school board. But I am here to assure you that we have spent countless hours on this. When I ran for the school board 4 years ago, I was given a clear mandate when I involved myself in the debates for that position and the forums that we needed to do something for technical education in this county. At the time, we were hoping that we had the viable option of the comprehensive tech school. I came on in a time when the ball was rolling. They had created the mascot. I mean, there was a lot of enthusiasm around it. And then I had the good fortune of the bad timing of when I got on the board, and we had to really recollect and reconsider. But the past board, and then when the current board members came up, we never stopped asking Mr. Schaefer and now Dr. Devine, what are we going to do? We can't keep this on our CIP every year, so what else are we going to do? We had many different scenarios that we discussed, you know.
Can I hear what they are?
We did talk about things like, one of the things that we came up with was the off-the-wall idea of, can we completely redistrict and look at repurposing one of our high schools? Which community would you like me to go into and tell them you will no longer have your high school as your central community high school? Not gonna happen. It's not, that would not be well received in the public, and I know that. And there's a lot, and it's not just because people would give us pushback. You don't get into this job if you're not used to putting up with a little bit of controversy. But it really, there's a lot, there's a lot of, that's not feasible to that scenario.
Have you looked into, the privatization of the cosmetology program, taking it off, site to another location?
Well, but there comes a whole host of logistics with that. Not only would you have to seek out people who can offer that, which I haven't had people emailing and calling me readily available to offer that program within our county, but then I have to have separate additional transportation and logistics costs to that. So, you really, you start to play with making this very complex, convoluted setup versus what we have now, and I know you said this before, what we have now works really, really well. It's not perfect, but it works really well. We have a history of incredible success with that program. We have the top certification rate in the county, in the state, excuse me. But it's not serving enough kids. We want to expand the access. We don't really want to reinvent the wheel because it's working.
Okay. So how much land do you have over there at the School of Technology, the current location?
60 acres.
The current location is 60?
Yeah, it goes all the way down to the river and all the way down the exit ramp, but it also includes Bayview and the current school.
Well, obviously it's large enough that it was going to be able to house a comprehensive high school on that site, including all the athletic fields and things like that. And we could do that. We could do what Dorchester did, and we could have charged them with, well, we can't have comprehensive, but build a brand new facility right next to it. That would have been $40 million.
I know that the other schools that are over capacity, you put relocatables there. What about the double wides, the temporary buildings, to house, to expand that location for certain classes?
But
You criticized the last administration for putting relocatables.
And not
in
just,
our high schools.
but not just that. We have schools in varying degrees of age and shape. If you walk into a Gilpin Manor Elementary looks a heck of a lot different than Calvert Elementary right now. And while I would love to be able to wave a magic wand and make them all look beautiful, I also know that the staff and the teachers, they do the best with what they have, and the kids do a pretty good job every day. When it comes to technical education, there is nothing more important than the equipment that they're working on. That is their education. And those students are now working in a building that is completely outdated and is a hindrance to their education. I can't make that same drastic argument for a Gilpin Manor. Yes, they're, you know, they really need some stuff, but they're learning just like the kids up the road in Calvert. And at our tech school right now, I'm actually amazed that we have the success we have. We are going to slip further and further behind because they are not keeping up. Our facility there is not keeping up with the latest technology and equipment that the industries are demanding that these kids come out with. That was the most interesting thing to me when we had one of our forums. I obviously am very passionate about the kids side of things and doing all we can, like Commissioner Hodge said. But what I've heard loud and clear is actually not about the kids. It's the businesses think that our school system is not doing enough for them to provide them the workforce that they need right now. Not, you know, that we're predicting in the future, that they literally cannot fill jobs right now because we're not
That's
giving them.
limited to the School of Technology, or is that across the board with other programs as well?
Particularly the technical programs.
And, I mean, we've heard a clear, that's the dilemma, is that we got a mandate as well, no new taxes. How can we justify?
We're not asking for that.
How can we justify a new building, a renovated, taking this offline? The other mandate was jobs. How can we justify taking this offline during these times? And
It's been vacant since 2003. What is it doing for you currently? It's not employing anyone. And reinvesting.
I will tell you that there was activity on this. There was a bid put on it. They did withdraw it, but there is activity. And now we're seeing that the dynamics are changing in Delaware. There is activity, and they're saying that, what was the conversation you had? We're gonna be the beneficiary of the networking that's going on with the technology programs over there.
At the former
University
Chrysler
of
site.
Yeah.
The train station they're gonna build there with regard to, there's not enough land around the peripheral of Newark to expand, and so the natural progression would be out Newark Elkton Road and then down to 95.
Which is the reason we would like to see the School of Technology right there as the center of whatever expands there. Because our kids are poised right here between Newark and Aberdeen. We need to provide a better technical education to them. And you know, quite frankly, folks, and Commissioner Brumel directly, you have to trust the people who understand, this is our business. We are in the education business. We are in education facilities business. And we are trying to bring to you a good faith response to something we really believe we need here. And we're talking about collaboration, but it begins with trusting the two entities that are seated across the table from one another.
This goes back to the study that was done in 2003 and then in 2005, and was the basis for the whole comprehensive program. That was only one component. You know, that team, and it was a large cross-section of people, county government, businesses, educators, who looked at all the career technology programs across the county in all our schools, not just at the VOTech school, but all programs, looked at each one of the trades, looked at what the demand was, what the earning potentials were for those positions, and evaluated every one of our programs. And the things that we could change, we have since that study. You know, so we have gone with the original recommendations of that study. This is the one component that we haven't been able to do anything with because of the physical limitations of the facility. You mentioned the STEP program. That was one of the ones that we implemented a couple of years ago through our own operating budget. We expanded that, we instituted that program. That's a new program, relatively new program. We talked about the other programs, Project Lead the Way, biomedical, at some of our other high schools. We have over 2,600 students taking career technology courses at all our schools. So, you know, it's not just about that one component. You know, we've been doing what we could with the facilities and the resources we have. Very successfully, you know, I think.
Mr. Mullins, have you heard anything today that would change your mind on your position?
Well, I'm gonna look at the numbers, but with regard to my central question is the transition from a school of tech to a comprehensive school. That was the first I had gotten that number. And then the fact that the school would absorb any additional cost overruns of the building. Willing to put $1.5 million toward equipment in the building. The engineering study would 60 days. I don't want you to get upset, but the issue of the redistricting. You mentioned that, but it didn't seem that you really went out and sincerely addressed that issue. I thought there's a little bit of trepidation there, and just let me speak. A little bit of trepidation that you wanted to go into the community, but you feared the pushback. I understand that, but that was something that I think that early on in this process, when we sat down and talked, was to look at that, because it sounds like out of the high school, you've got some that are at capacity or over and some that aren't. And if you're really sincere about the greater good that you talk about, I think that that should be something that should sincerely be looked at and not just rolled out on the table, but we don't want to because of the pushback.
That's not what's
I'm not done yet, please. So that is something that I think that honestly, if we could look at just in on paper, okay?
Commissioner Mellon, how many of the board meetings have you attended?
I've attended 2.
And what were those? Our budget meetings?
Yes.
How many of our regular business meetings have you attended?
I have not attended any.
Did you attend the redistricting hearing for Calvert?
No, I'm talking about high school. I'm not talking about elementary. You're changing
No,
the
but
subject on me. You're changing the subject on me.
attacking
We're
my
here. I'm not
integrity
attacking
at this
anybody.
moment.
I was asked my opinion, and I'm giving my opinion.
So,
But let me, redistricting the high schools doesn't change technical education. The two are parallel tracks.
I would also suggest that if we redistrict and we turn Bohemia Manor into a technical school, where are you gonna do diesel mechanics? Where are you gonna build?
We still have to spend the money to convert
Right.
those schools. You're still gonna have the same
I think we
There's
confused,
no
two things got confused.
There's the laboratories in the Gazelle property far exceed any laboratory that's in any high school. But the point is, I don't think that any of those high schools, even if you redistrict,
Are ready.
and I don't think you want in the paper, Jim Mullen supports eliminating Bohemia Manor as we know it today. Okay, that's not gonna happen. But the fact is that any of those high schools that we have, even if we redistrict, if it was possible, and politically we had the balls to do it, aren't set up for this purpose. They're not set up for a technical school. You'd have to spend millions of dollars, in my opinion, you'd have to spend more than building this, converting this school.
And I would have, if it was something that was necessary and needed and it was the right decision to do, I would have the ability to do that. But I don't enter into that lately. Ask Kent County how they feel about what it was like to do any kind of consolidation over there. We don't take, that is probably one of the most difficult things the school system has to take on.
That doesn't solve this problem.
And it doesn't solve this problem. That's a
That was
separate problem that we do continually look at. But you know what? One of the things is, once you redistrict, you can't go back. So I look to the decisions that the commissioners make on a day-to-day basis about growth in this county to try to figure out if we open up more growth around along the Route 40 corridor and we bring in more subdivisions there, that's going to increase my enrollment in Elkton. If I all of a sudden moved everybody from Rising Sun into Elkton and then 2 years later we had an explosion in Elkton, then what do I do? So we constantly have to evaluate, make predictions of the future. So it's not that I don't have the ability to do it or the want to take it on. It's that I'm trying to make the smartest decision about when the appropriate timing to do that is, because believe me, it is not something that's done lightly. It isn't. And especially in Cecil County, we are a community schools county. People bleed those schools in those communities. So in a lot of communities, you got generation after generation who went to this. It amazes me when we did the redistricting, what people come out are very passionate about something that kind of seemed no nonsense to us. And when we heard the emotion and the passion about that, it's
you made
not,
the right
again,
decision anyway.
it's not that I didn't want to take it on, but I want to apologize that I care about how it impacts people personally. So
considered many suggestions as a board. If we thought that was a viable option, whether the public or the community didn't agree with it or not, if we thought that was the right answer, we as a Board of Education would take that on and research it. We had looked at so many options. We have come to you with other plans on the table. So we have looked at that, and it's not the pushback that we go, oh, we don't want to do that because the community might be unhappy. That's not what stops us. It's not for the betterment of our students.
Well, and
That's
this is,
why
we actually, I will tell you, the main driver of this decision is economics. It's the tax base. It's the saving the taxpayers a heck of a lot of money versus the other scenarios we've presented in the past. So that's why I get kind of confused, because I would actually think that we would see eye to eye on this. I mean, I see this as a huge cost savings in the long run to the taxpayers in getting something that this county desperately needs. You know, I could bide my time and I could wait and I could say, you know, put forth in a couple years from now, put forth the $40 to $60 million proposal and get that through. But that wouldn't be the right thing to do from an economics perspective. I mean, it feels crazy, but we are really sitting in this once in a lifetime kind of potential opportunity here to get something for a heck of a lot cheaper than it would normally cost.
Well, the other thing I think that we need to remember is you're not asking us to vote on this right now.
No.
What you're asking for is the ability to go do the due diligence.
The engineering, study you're gonna be paying for, are you, choosing the company, or how is that working?
We use a qualification-based selection process like we do with all of our projects.
Bid it.
Just asking.
I think that's the other thing, there's kind of an urgency to allow us to get into, number one, we need to negotiate a purchase price. And also, as Mr. Willis indicated, we've submitted this in our CIP. We can't ask the state to commit the money for a property that we don't own. So we need to get the timeline, we need to get moving on that. So at least, you know, I doubt if we have till at the end of November.
Yeah, after the.
You know, I doubt if we'll be through the process by then, but at least if we're in the process, maybe that would give the state some assurances that they can reasonably commit, or be in a position where they can reasonably commit funding for us for next year. If we don't do something quickly, then we're gonna lose that window of opportunity, and it's gonna be pushed out another year. So it's really critical that we get into the due diligence process. We negotiate a contract, we get in the building, we see what the situation is in the building, and then, as you know, the way the process works, you could say no at any point in time after that.
I don't have all the
If for
information.
any reason we wanna walk away from it, we can walk away from it.
Absolutely,
And, you know, we're out whatever money we put in, but the county, isn't out anything.
And I think that's another point to this is, you know, we keep saying that we need this information and that you all are not committing. The board is not committing. You know, if information comes back that the board's not comfortable with, at any point in time, we can say, this doesn't look good. But I feel like, how can we truly make that fully educated decision if we're not gonna allow ourselves to go through the process? Unless you just absolutely are against the idea of improving technical education in this county. And if that's it, then that's it. Then let's call it that and be done. But if you think, well, you know what, this is something that I agree with you on, it's something we need to take a look at, then really just asking to further investigate this. I mean, I think that just kind of gives good faith on both sides of the table of, we're gonna work together to kind of see if this feels right to us and if this feels okay. And we can have further discussions when that information comes back about how we feel about the results and what it says and, you know, how we feel about it. But
Well, I asked, as you know, Lisa Webb, her opinion on this, and she doesn't advocate selling it to the schools. Thinks it would be a key property for technological companies. I would like to have a discussion with our staff on the numbers. You know, it seemed they've had a different opinion, and I guess we can get back to you
presented this today, we can vet it and get it back to you. And to your point, if anybody has any questions, can meet with you.
Absolutely, and I'll just remind you that we have, this is a process that we started with our board about this time last year, and we brought this to your attention in January, and we really do believe in it, and we do need it to come to fruition, and we would urge you to really look forward and vote for us to go into negotiations, for you to enter into negotiations so that we can take a look at what this property can do, knowing full well you can back out at any point. But we need a solution to the issue.
And I'd like to say that we're impeding the careers of 150 to 200 students, Cecil County students, every year by not taking action. If we are leaving them in limbo, we're not giving them a valuable option for their career, because if they're not going to go to college, what are they going to do? And we are shortchanging them, and I don't think it's acceptable.
I'd like to propose we put this on our work session agenda next week for discussion and decision.
Do we have enough time to vet the numbers through here?
These are the same
The same
numbers
numbers.
that were presented to us.
No, they said that
These are revised
Yeah.
numbers.
They're slightly revised.
The revision
I'd
is
like to see
it.
Inconsequential. The numbers here are so similar that you can't tell the difference. There's not.
Okay, so the numbers are the same.
The project is right.
Where the money comes
Project
from
cost
is
is the
different.
same, the million and a
It's
half
the
is
source of the money.
our contribution is new, and the state number is revised per Lever, per Dr. Lever.
So the renovation cost, I have the handout where you said it was only a third of the building. I have it,
No.
I've
No.
got it on the
We'd
handout.
like to see it because we have
Yes.
those in
It may,
I will bring it. I'll email.
that was never the intention. It may have been miscommunicated. It's never the intention.
I'm telling you, it was written down. No, I'd like to know, if you're saying that the 38 million, or 3,800,000 is the total renovation cost of the whole building.
9.9 million.
Like, 3.8 is
Oh,
your
I'm
piece.
sorry. My
This county's piece. The entire building.
Yeah, so when the project is said and done, for the purpose that we have now, it will be completely renovated. The only additional renovations would be down the road, a decade from now, if we ever converted it to a comprehensive school. But-
What we said
but no
was-
I understand,
renovation,
I
right.
understand.
What we said was we would be moving in, we would be expanding programs and implementing new programs
As we
as
can
we could afford them
them.
in our operating budget, so maybe that's where the
But that's just
confusion is.
physically moving that.
Whole thing.
So are we going to put it on our work session agenda on Tuesday?
Talk to Mr. Wine. Talk to him about putting it on. I don't know if it'll be open, closed, if we're talking negotiations, but I'll get that through.
I think the decision should be an open session.
It's a simple case. Either we're gonna support the effort of the school to do their due diligence, or whether this is a practical project or not.
Okay, that's fine.
That's the question.
Okay,
It's
that's
not- We're
fine.
not negotiating price, we're not
Gotcha.
negotiating a contract. We're asking ourselves, are we gonna allow the school board to do their due diligence on this property, yes or no?
Yeah, I think the process we're talking about is the option agreement process in Article 25(8). Is that what you're looking at, Tom?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, with that, the option period is, it's a 6-month max option period. And
Yes.
with, the purchase price has to be identified within the agreement.
Correct, right.
There's a public hearing.
Right.
Right, once the price is fixed, then it goes to
Yeah, once it's
public
signed by
hearing.
both parties, it's public, and then there's a public hearing.
Is that before the due diligence?
No.
Yeah, I guess,
Right,
the
and-
due diligence would take place within that 6-month period, I
Right.
would imagine.
Mhm. Yeah, probably,
Yeah.
I would say public hearing would be after that, after we know.
Yeah.
And-
What we're talking
That
about,
there's an
right,
option.
Because that could affect
And I'd
the
like,
negotiations, depending
I'd
on
like
what we
to-
find.
Sure.
I'd like to say that we, the commissioners, have several opportunities to stop this project. If we allow it to go forward, we can stop the project. If we have an option agreement and we have a public hearing and the public comes and says, don't do this, you have the option to say, we're not gonna do this. If the public comes and says, we like it, then maybe it would be more supportive. But the fact is, we need, in my opinion, we need to consider this seriously, consider this and move the ball forward.
Again, that's what we're asking for. We're asking for a due diligence study. We're not asking for a commitment that you're, if you support the due diligence, we're not saying you have to follow it all the way through. We want progress. We want to move forward with this. That's what we're asking.
And we're open, Mr. Wilson and I, of course, are open to working with whatever staff you want us to work with. And as Ms. Camphausen said, looking at the other opportunities that this could open up for the county at large. The fire departments have put through, some concerns or some potential on their part. Emergency services, we got that, the generator there that can support the entire building, take it off the grid. So we think, plus with 91 acres, Parks and Rec could always use more field space. So I think there's a lot of opportunities that we could partner together on this and come together with something that will be good for the county at large.
Right, I agree. We would just appreciate an answer when it gets time. Thank you.
Thank you.